privacy should be the default when it comes to working with AI. But at the very least, when it comes to our conversations with AI, privacy should be a choice, not according to Meta. In a nutshell, Meta have recently announced that from December 16th, 2025, they are going to scrape your AI chat history and use that for fuel to feed its ad engine. And the worst thing about it is you can't opt out. I'll go into some of the details of what Meta has announced, although they have been fairly sketchy on some of these details. But there's some things we need to be aware of. I'll move more into ways that we can guarantee that we're using AI privately when we want to introduce you to some free tools where you can basically access free AI that is completely private and you are 100% in control of the conversation and it never needs to leave your computer. Let's have a look at a couple of the headlines that we have here. So Meta are basically going to use any AI interaction across all of their platforms. So just remember, these are things like anything to do with Facebook and Instagram and tools like WhatsApp, any touch point across any of their tools, they are going to use that for harvesting and cross-platform integrations. The other thing to note here is just how short some of these articles are, because the information and the specifics that Meta have announced have not really been very clear yet. So there's a lot of questions as to the scope. Take that one again. So in this article, I quite like the title, Meta will soon use AI chats for ad targeting, because of course they will. So you may have seen some of these notifications. Again, most of us probably don't read them, but that is what they're about. To add a little bit of balance to what they're saying here, if I just zoom in, they have said that topics such as people's religious views, sexual orientation, political views, health, racial or ethnic origin, philosophical beliefs, or trade union memberships will not be fed into the ad engine. The author does rightly note here that we wouldn't recommend discussing any of these topics, especially with Meta, despite what they're saying here. You've also got to remember that in order for them not to feed this into the ad engine, they do first have to scrape that data, read that data, understand that data about you in order to not put it. There's a couple of elements, and it's this last point here, whether you like it or not. That's probably the bit that really gets to me, is the no opt-out. So whilst they're doing this, you do not have the choice. So they've just decided, Christy Harris, who is the privacy policy manager, has made it very clear that there is no option. So as far as your privacy is concerned, you have no choice. The other point that this article makes is to do with WhatsApp. And WhatsApp's a messaging app similar to Telegram. It has a much higher adoption in the European Union than in the US, but it is growing in the US as well. Fairly recently, they forced a couple of AI features into WhatsApp. And again, there was no opt-out, and we see why that is the case now. The other thing that's worth noting is this announcement applies to everywhere geographically apart from the UK, the European Union, and South Korea, because our data privacy laws are stricter than that in the US, and they currently prohibit this type of activity. Of course, Meta are looking to see if they can get around that. So what options do we have? Just to pick companies that we are happy to work with, where we're happy with their data privacy policies, where there are options for us to opt out, complete privacy, where we're using open sourced local AI on our own computer that we download and we use on our own computer. We don't need internet access. We can have any conversation, feed it any file, delete any conversation, and it never leaves our laptop. So that is the spectrum of options that we have. Let me very quickly take you through a couple of examples. We go into the settings in something like ChatGPT here. We do have data controls here. This one here is improves the model for everyone. By turning this off, means that none of your data, your conversations are used for model training. So nothing goes into the actual model's training data. The rest of the data would sit in your chats down the left-hand side. So these would, of course, be on their servers, but the controls here, you can do things like, for example, delete all the chat. So if you decided to leave OpenAI, you can delete everything, or you can go in and manage them at different levels. So this is an example of the data controls that are available through something like OpenAI. You can look at other companies like Anthropic or Google and just make sure that you are happy with the level of control that you have over your own data. But if you want to take it one step further, then I'd recommend having a look at tools such as Jan AI or LM Studio. Jan AI is a open sourced user interface similar to ChatGPT, like this, where you can have your chats get listed down the side here. But the difference is this is downloaded and you can download models locally and just use them locally on your computer. This means any data that you put in here is not sent to another company's cloud or servers. It's not stored anywhere. It never has to leave your computer as long as you're using a local model. The other option is you can use open source models and you can use their cloud infrastructure where they essentially process your request, return your answer, but do not store the data in the servers. So if you're using a fairly small model that your computer is capable of processing, then you can just run everything locally. However, if you want to use a slightly more advanced model that you really need more compute power, then you can use some of these other options through an API. This is the gold standard, and this is just one example. As I say, LM Studio is another one that does something similar. This one isn't open source. This is actually closed source, but you can run it locally on your computer as well. Ollama is another one that's catching up. And these are very simple. The reason I've selected these is they're very simple. You can just download it like you would download a normal application on your computer. So you don't need to do any installations from your terminal window like you do with things like LibreChat, OpenWebUI, which are excellent tools. They're just a little trickier to set up. If you'd like me to take you through setting up something like Jan or LM Studio or things like LibreChat, then I'd be happy to show you what models to look for, how to run the cloud ones, and how you can work with things like images and files and so on using privacy first approach. Anyway, I hope you found that helpful. Any questions, comments, or you want me to go deeper into any of these topics, please just let me know.